Hi, and welcome to Regenerative Revolution. I'm Jacki Saorsail, and we're here with Jonathan Kabat and Lauren Bond. We're talking about their Hotlum Eco-Regeneration Camp in Hotlum, California, on the slopes of Mount Shasta, that they are turning into a campsite that people come out and learn about regenerative management of a fire ecology, and they'd be restoring the land and have all sorts of programs out there, some of which they would lead, some of which they'd have other people lead, and they do research out there, get grants. There's lots of things that they could do. We've been talking about that over the last few sessions, and I've been filling out this regenerative enterprise design canvas that you see, or design workbook that you see below me, and then that's been helping me fill out a business model canvas for them, which is just like a summarized business plan, basically. So that's what we've been working through, and as you can see underneath them is their bio and a project description. If you want to learn a little bit more about them, you can read that and also go to their websites. The links are down there. So today we're going to be talking about their structure of their organization. So before we get to that, though, let's do a quick check-in. How are you guys?
We're good. We just came out of an amazing wilderness area, and we were scouting for our other company, The River's Path, to find a river, and we found a river that we can canoe that has hot waterfalls. So a hot spring that forms huge waterfalls and huge pools. And so we're in the beginning stages of dreaming into that vision, and we're back from the wilderness. Yeah,
it was, I think we both really needed a vacation.
So work vacation.
Yeah, so it's been, I mean, of course it was work and also needed vacation as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we were celebrating Jonathan's birthday.
Oh, happy birthday.
Yep, adventuring, driving hundreds of miles of dirt roads.
It was
literally
awesome. Like it was really shocking how many dirt roads we drove in the middle of nowhere. I mean, really middle of nowhere. Yeah. Places where they're like, next gas 80 miles.
Oh yeah.
So
nice.
It was pretty sweet. And then the gas station we found, it was like twice as expensive as any gas that you'll find in any urban area, because it's like the only one in 100 miles.
Yeah.
Wow. So it was really good and much needed. So
that sounds awesome. That's great.
Now we're only an hour from our home in California. We're only an hour from Hotlum now.
That sounds great. Cool. Yeah. I'm here in Norman, Oklahoma, and I just got home from my job at Natural Grocers. That's fun, selling lots of supplements for immune systems right now, especially with all the college kids being back and partying. I hear them at night partying like there's no tomorrow all around me. I'm sure they're being so safe.
I'm sure.
Yeah, sure.
Distant trap buddies.
Yeah, they are all around me. Alrighty then. I also wanted to set a little context for where we're at. We are on Twitch. We're live streaming this, and it says we have one viewer. I always get confused because I'm not sure if that viewer is me, because it said 0 until like 2 seconons ago. But if there is somebody watching, they're not saying anything. I'm wondering if it's a stalker.
Hey, hi.
Hi. Say hi to us.
It's a fan.
If you're there, or if you're not just me, I don't know. I've heard that people are watching it on YouTube. Some people are watching it like consistently because they're interested, apparently. That's awesome.
Great.
Hopefully we can get some more people like that. But, I need to do some marketing. But right now I'm working on my master's degree, so I'm a little torn as far as the amount of energy I have to put into that at the moment. But it's okay.
We're getting all of the material ready.
Yeah.
For the launch.
Yeah. Exactly. And I'm getting into this. Like I'm still getting good at it. I'm still learning how to do it, It takes a while to get into it.
You're developing a fan club.
Yeah. I'm working on it here. I'm going to adjust the screen just a little bit because my document's a little bit too wide and it's getting cut off. So I'm trying to fix it. Okay, now they can see the whole screen. Okay, coming down to this section. We talked about your financial goals last time. That was a fun conversation, talking about money. And today we're talking about structure. So this is the part that I think you guys actually said you needed more help with, is structuring the organization that's going to run the thing. So yeah, there's several different parts of this. There's the ownership structure, there's the governance structure, and there's different levels of that. There's different layers of that, especially in a community organization. It can be a lot more complex than your typical business where you just have employees and employers and customers. You know, here you've got this kind of mixture. Everybody's participants. And so, you know, it can be more confusing who's doing what. And so it's good before we, you know, get to like, you know, the roles and responsibilities that we're clear on, like who's in at what level and who's on the fringes, and who has the least decision-making power, who has the most decision-making power, who do you determine who's in the group that makes the decisions or who's outside of that group, or are there different levels of decision-making. So that's what we're getting clear on first. And so I have this lovely circles of engagement diagram, which I got from my friend Arthur Brock, who is one of the founders of Holochain. He came up with this little schema here, although I made this kind of version here that's kind of simplified in Google Docs here. So yeah, I have a Google drawing open right now. Let me make sure the audience can see it. Yeah, the audience can see it. This Google drawing. I don't know if they can see the whole thing though. Let me shrink it just a little bit so that they can see the entire image. Okay, so what we have are circles, and so, you know, the innermost circles would be kind of the top level of decision making, or the top level of ownership, you know, however you're going to think about it, and then going out from there to the outer circles. And then for each one of these levels, you've got just what the name of it is. So that would be on the top. We'll just name each one. And then on the bottom, we'll come up naming what you have to do to get into that circle. And then on the left, we'll name what it is that people in that circle are contributing to the organization. And then on the right, we'll put what they're receiving from the organization. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I sent you as an example that's already filled out, but I've got a blank one in front of me.
Great.
I'll type into with text boxes. So yeah, thinking about your organization, what are some of the different levels or layers or circles?
Well, how much of this are we copying, and how much of, I mean, I don't know necessarily like how we want to, I don't know how to answer that.
Well,
Okay.
let me try something on for Sana.
Mm-hmm.
I was having a conversation with a dear friend of mine and talking about this issue of, say, living in a society where there isn't such a thing as ownership per se, but simultaneously that there would be something that one receives in abundance by what they place their attention on, or what they're contributing, what they steward, actually. And from a community garden perspective, you know, the one that is planting the most is obviously going to reap the most.
Mm-hmm.
And he said that that's the way that a lot of indigenous cultures wild tend, that the one that's tending that particular plant or that particular place would be the one who is receiving the most benefit, but that everybody would receive benefit. So I like this model
Mm-hmm.
based on this idea that you can participate to the level that you can
Mm-hmm.
and that you're interested in.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would say that, you know, initially we have visitors. We have
Mm-hmm.
people who are just curious. They might be visitors to your, you know, information sessions, or they might be somebody who would actually come and stay for a weekend, but they're really just there to observe. And so I would, you know, think of those as visitors.
Mm-hmm.
And you kind of show those as newcomers.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are, participants, and those may be people who come and actually want to take a workshop, and their learning is more engaged, and they may or may not pay a fee for that workshop, but they're engaged because they're there with a request to learn something and to participate at some level, and they're definitely receiving, a true experience that's organized and facilitated, and hopefully they're feeling a sense of real connection with the place and with the people who are engaged there. So I kind of think of those participants as participants of workshops and such.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas a member might be somebody who makes more of a commitment, someone who wants to participate on an ongoing basis,
Mm-hmm.
annually or monthly, quarterly. And that would be someone who may even be wanting to, do some kind of a membership commitment. It could be a time commitment, a labor commitment, a, donation commitment.
Mm-hmm.
And then I guess you start getting into the contributors. And this is where it gets a little fuzzy for me.
Mm-hmm.
And, I've mentioned place, which is people engaged with arts and ecology in Oakland, and they have a very interesting model of how they're structured.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've been wanting to learn more about their model. And there are those that are actually voting members.
Mm-hmm.
And so maybe at the point of being a contributor, you start having a certain amount of say over decisions that are made.
Mm-hmm.
And so that would be a differentiation between a member and a contributor. Or maybe the members is where you start having a say. And I think they have two tiers, that people are actually living there and contributing on an ongoing basis. Then they have people who are just members.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they have different amount of kind of say in what's actually happening. And then I guess, partner would be someone who's really deeply financially invested at some level and has a serious time commitment.
Which
So,
at this point would be the two of us. But we'd like to have more in that circle.
yeah, but
And
we have a couple of contributors now, people
Yeah.
who are staying there, doing some study, for a
Mhm.
length of time. And we have people who are also starting to produce, content for us, videographers, mappers,
Mhm.
drone
And-
video footage and other footage of interviews.
I think our forester would be maybe somewhere in that. I don't know. What do you think? As far as
I
contributors?
don't know what his commitment level is.
Yeah, because he's
hired. So
Yeah.
that's an interesting thing. It's like when someone's hired to do a job and the job is based more on financial, pay for services, that's different than maybe what Lauren's thinking. But I think we've invited him to participate in a deeper way, and we'll see how that goes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then I think some of the other things, Jonathan talked about people that are, coming up and volunteering. Like the members would be people that are coming up and volunteering on a regular basis.
Mhm.
And I imagine like a contributor would be somebody that would actually get really involved with a particular project, who has some expertise in that. And, like say if we were going to build a community space and there was somebody who was going to spearhead the construction of that or something.
Mhm.
Like that could be somebody who would be in a contributor role.
Yeah, can I just speak to contributors for a moment?
Yeah.
So we have somebody who is a lifelong wildlands firefighter and a registered forester in the state of Oregon,
Mhm.
and has suggested that he would be interested in helping us design burn programs and such.
Mhm.
So he might end up being a contributor.
Mhm.
We have a friend who's an architect who's willing to do some workshops on community spaces, and maybe at one point he would want to be a contributor.
Mhm.
We have other friends who have expressed an interest in doing other, things that they're highly skilled at.
Mhm.
mapping, for example, or environmental sciences, wildlife biologists doing a a survey of all the wildlife.
Mhm.
So maybe that's what Lauren's speaking about.
And then one other thing that, I mean, that was what I was speaking of. Thank you for that clarification. So the other thing was where my it's a question maybe for you, Jackie, maybe for you, Jonathan, but the people that are doing financial contributions, like we have our first grant that's not a government grant. But,
shout out to the Mustard Seed Trust. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. So my question is, I expect that there may be other people that do financial contributions, individuals or trust, foundations. So I'm not sure where they would fit in this, and maybe it would be a case by case basis because with these folks, they just said send us pictures, of your kitchen when you're done, which is awesome. But so I don't know how that where they would fit on this level of engagement, but it's definitely really important, but also very different kind of engagement than offering the physical labor or expertise, but actually offering the financial contribution. So
I see here under contributor on the left hand side it says investment on contract worker investment, and so make a contribution on the bottom. And so I'm wondering about that, like if someone just makes a large financial contribution, that may or may not in the long term be as valuable as someone who brings a group of children to learn about ecology and nature connection practices. What's really going to restore humanity's relationship to the biosphere? And so always coming back to that question that you so eloquently put, I think it was one of our first sessions with you, about having a purpose statement that you can go back to and say, is this really contributing to that? And financial investment's important, but simultaneously maybe something else someone's doing may appear now to be very small, but just like a seed, it's going to grow into some huge tree. So that's something to just kind of think about.
Yeah. So I mean, this is flexible. It's up to you how you define things, but the important thing here is that these are meaningful boundaries. So what are your boundaries as far as letting people, like, what would it take for someone to have the same amount of power as you in every decision you make? What would it take for somebody to be able to challenge you and actually win in an argument versus what would it take for somebody to be able to vote for something that you're willing to let everybody decide on?
Well, I think this is a really good question because what we're really trying to create is a more of a sociocracy type of governance where we do have a collaborative consensus based decision making. But that is I think a really important question because we're kind of feeling into like what like I don't know if I have the answer yet on this, but in my thought as far as where someone would be at the same level of I guess as we are, like within this little yellow circle in the middle. I think that it would need to be like they move in. I mean, they spend a significant amount of time there. They're very much engaged in like sharing their ideas and also implementing. So not just being an ideas person, which is great. They could be a contributor, contributing ideas. But I think as far as the decision making, I think I would need someone who's really demonstrating a commitment to implement the ideas that they have, and being able to communicate well with being able to hear our concerns, our questions, or whatever, and being able to respond and be able to have really solid communication with us. That feels really important, I think. I think that, if they can help financially, that's awesome, but I wouldn't say that that's a requirement. You know, but if there's but really, I mean, I want someone who's really committed to this vision, not just as an outside, like they're going to come in and look and have some great ideas and leave, but someone who's like, I'm in. This is what I'm supposed to do with my life, and you know, I have some ideas. I want to know how I can help. I want to listen, and really like learn the vision of Hotlum, that and see like where I fit into that and how my vision can kind of combine and grow with the vision that we've created.
Yeah.
Does that feel accurate, Jonathan?
Yeah, I mean, I have a story, and what shows up on this to me is there's like contributor, but there's also like the implementer. And maybe it's implementer / contributor. Maybe somebody who's implementing things with their labor. There are others that are contributing things, but they may not be implementing. And so there's kind of a dual role there that could be on the same circle level. And it reminds me of some friends of mine bought a hot springs, and I went to one of their meetings and I got really excited. And so I made some offerings, and I kind of got this like pushback, and it was basically, you know, why don't you listen for a while about what we're up to? And so I think that one of the things that we experience a lot is we get a lot of enthusiasm from people, but they're kind of reiterating things that we've been talking about for, you know, almost 2 years now. So yeah, great ideas. And simultaneously, really, it's been difficult for anyone to step up and implement anything.
Right.
And some of that's, you know, based on our stage of development and, you know, our, you know, challenges with entitlements of what we can do with the land at this stage. But some of it's also just that, you know, people are more like visitors. So I think what Lauren's looking at is that perhaps somebody comes and they have a huge heart commitment, but they're not able to actually take action on things.
Right.
And that's a difficult stage we're in right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, let's go back to that like center point that you were talking about, Lauren, with, you know, somebody who was like really committed and living out there all the time.
Not necessarily all the time, but just a significant amount.
Amount of time. I mean, what would you call someone at that level of involvement?
Well, I'm kind of looking at this circle that you're calling a contributor. And I see that someone could be contributing in 2 ways. And so one of the things we're really interested in is people who are local being very involved, people who can drive up to Hotlum in less than a half an hour. And like we have one friend who lives about an hour plus north of us, who's going to come down and help facilitate programs. And so she's close enough and has a lot of experience. She teaches a permaculture design course. And so she might be somebody who actually becomes, you know, a contributor, like a, you know, a little bit more than somebody who is, you know, coming in from Colorado to do a workshop once a year, but was actually there on a monthly basis. So I think there's this time commitment piece, how frequent and how much time, frequency and the amount of time.
But she was asking about partner, and I just lost will you repeat the question that you had to
Yeah.
make sure that
Well, I'm trying to differentiate because it seems like there's a level where, you know, somebody's coming out maybe on a regular basis and contributing or doing a particular project, and that they might have some certain level of responsibility and decision-making power. But I'm wondering, you know, is that different from the level that you are at as decision makers and power holders? Where is that line?
You know, I think we're still trying to identify specifically what that line is. But for me, the biggest thing, I mean, it's just what I said, that I really want to feel their commitment to like dive in and not just come and visit or contribute to a project or whatever, but like really dive in and make this their life's work.
Right. So, I mean, I assume that you would have a conversation and that they would, you know, either ask to be involved at that level or you would invite them to be involved in that level. But, you know, what is that level? What is it? And how many people do you want in that level? How many people are you willing to have that much shared power with?
Right. I guess this comes back to this question that we had with the attorney that we spoke with recently, with the possibility of an LLC versus a social benefit corporation,
Mm-hmm.
which is a particular kind of corporation in California, and it is about scalability. We don't see anybody who's like ready to pony up $250,000
Mm-hmm.
to help really launch this effort.
Mm-hmm.
But money is one of the big issues, and again, this boils down to, just because you have $250,000 you can plunk into a project to start a center, does that give you the same voting rights as someone who is starting a children's program and bringing really no money, but is bringing the youth that we want to be engaged in this practice
Mm-hmm.
of restoring humanity's relationship with the biosphere?
Mm-hmm.
So I guess if we had somebody who was like moving to the area and was, able to do a monthly program and was like committing their life to this work, that would say a lot.
Mm-hmm.
It would also say a lot if somebody had a huge chunk of change
Mm-hmm.
and was willing to buy into the project, because, we are leveraged in this project financially. So I guess that's what Lauren was saying. It's like making it their life's work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is our life's work.
Yeah.
And I think it would be something that where I like what you were saying about, like, it would be a conversation that we would have with them.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they would say, it would initiate with them saying, this is my,
Offering.
This is my offering, and I really want to be involved at that level. Or maybe we're seeing that level of engagement and making and making an invitation, inviting them to be more involved. So, yeah.
And would that mean?
So just because someone gave a ton of money doesn't necessarily mean that we'd invite them to be a partner, but we would see their level of commitment, and then it'd be a case by case.
Well, yeah, I mean, it would depend on how they contributed that money, because if they contributed it as a loan, absolutely, you retain all of the power. If they contributed it as stock, it'd be really hard to say, oh, hey, you don't have any decision-making power because you're not doing anything out here. Like, you can't really do that if somebody's, like, actually purchasing the company. Like, so what is that level? Do they have ownership? Do they have legal decision-making power? Or is this just kind of an arrangement where you're just agreeing to let them help you make certain decisions?
I think that this is, so one of the things, because we haven't incorporated yet,
mm-hmm.
Part of this, I think, is going to depend on what kind of incorporation we do and
mm-hmm.
what that legal structure will be.
Mm-hmm.
At this point, I figure that the business will be owned by the two of us.
Mm-hmm.
But we have looked into having a cooperative membership sort of situation, and a lot of different things like that. And so, a lot of it's going to depend on that. But
and the ownership of the organization and the ownership of the land could be separate, or they could be combined. So that's up to you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's something that we've definitely spoken to our attorneys about in the challenge of, is the land something that is available for use for a particular project or a particular venture, but the land is retained by us until such a time that we feel like we can structure a trust
mm-hmm.
to preserve it, in perpetuity.
Yeah.
Which tension.
Yeah, I mean, if you're planning on putting the land in a trust, then it would make sense to just keep the ownership of the organization completely separate.
So this is where we're getting into the bylaws of incorporating,
mm-hmm.
and I think we're feeling like we really need an attorney's assistance to figure out how best to do this, and we're still dancing between even what kind of corporation to incorporate as.
Mm-hmm.
We haven't solved that problem, over the last year.
I do have a couple of thoughts, though.
Mm-hmm.
because this, I mean, we could go down the rabbit hole of like that we don't know about our legal thing, but I actually want to say at this point, my feeling as I feel into it, I would love to have, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 of us that are in that inner partnership circle that are deeply, deeply involved with Hotlum. I would love that. And I think that and being a partner, co-owner of the organization, I think that those could potentially be 2 different things, and I don't know that we need to. Like my thought, it would take a heck of a lot for me to say, I trust you so much that I want you to be co-owner of this organization. Like it would be, I mean, at this point with the Rivers Path, with my other company, I just hired a day trip coordinator who I am hoping, and I'm using this as an example because she's someone who I'm seeing in that inner circle with my business. I like this model, by the way, and it's making me think with my organization too. But with her, like I want her to be integrally involved with all the decisions with the Rivers Path, at least with the day trips that she's in charge of. I want her to be in charge of one particular part, like basically half of my organization. I want her to take the lead and run with it, make it better and make it more amazing.
Right, but
that, yeah, what I'm trying to say is that does not mean that I want her to, I am not going to become now a partnership LLC with her being a partner. And same thing with Jonathan. It is still like I'm the owner of the business. What I'm trying to say is that I see that those for me are probably 2 separate things. Not being owner, but still being an integral decision maker in ideally every aspect of what we do with Hotlum. But we have to have the right person. There you go.
So this is really a threshold question. And Lauren's bringing an example that I unfortunately don't feel truly applies. And so the question is, what governance practice? So when you look at social, environmental, and government investing, governance investing, SEG investing, one of the things they're looking at is how much say do employees have in the running of the company? How much reward also? And the strange thing that comes out of that oftentimes is that there's also not the level of liability. And so this is something that I'm not really clear about, is like, how does a cooperative share liability versus a corporation in which, certain officers of that corporation are holding liability, and there's liability insurance for those operators.
It's the same with a cooperative. The people on the board of directors are legally liable as much as the people on the board of directors of a corporation.
Right. And so I think this is where I think, when people are receiving benefit for something, they also, want to be able to have say and have benefit, but there's also this piece of, their responsibility. One of the entitlement issues that we have with this particular property is that we're entitled to build a single family home. And so many people have come to me and said, oh, are you going to build an eco village? Or are you going to build, a place for tiny houses? Or are you going to, on and on, this idea of a built community? And what we're really interested in is like, would somebody be living in the nearby already, or would somebody want to purchase land nearby and, develop a way where they could work there year round? But we may not be able to house everybody. They may have to commute, a half an hour or less to, work there. So that would be like a level of commitment. But then at some point, we start to notice that they're willing to take the responsibility of, say, someone who's on a board of directors. One of the things that, I find interesting about people who want to be on, directorship track in an organization is they don't really understand the legal implications of that. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think, we would have to vet somebody, and I think it's an ongoing process.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're much more ready to look at the other circles earlier on. But for an example, just a not so great example, but somebody really wanted to plant some things on the property,
Mm-hmm.
but they weren't around to tend those things. So we're going to be going back, to California shortly. We're about an hour away, and those plants may have died because no one has been tending them.
Mm-hmm.
This comes back to kind of the indigenous thing. If somebody really wants something, they need to be willing to make a commitment to it. It's like, people who have a dog and then just want to give up the dog rather than be there for the lifetime of the dog.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So I think that's part of what we're looking for, is like, how committed are people?
Yeah.
And quite frankly, nobody's willing to live there year round at this point.
Yeah.
So we're struggling with that. So one of the things that would be really interesting is if somebody said, I want to be a land steward, and they would show up and they would commit to a certain number of months just looking after the trees and looking after the wildlife, and being available to that role. So that would be like a step towards. So I think similar to some like cooperative housing situations I've seen, there's like a slow process of getting to know somebody and seeing, them showing up to meetings and showing up to, or do they have follow through, like Lauren was saying, and, implementing their ideas rather than simply giving an idea and then expecting somebody else to take care of their muse.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a big thing for me.
Yeah.
Is those that say, I want this, but then they don't realize that we're talking about hundreds of years of tending this.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I want to be clear, because you said, oh, well, we need to talk to a lawyer. I mean, the point of me doing this with you is to talk through what you want so that you don't have to sit there for, 10 hours spending, $300 an hour talking to the lawyer, so that you walk in there knowing what you want. And, I'm not here to tell you what you want. I'm here to help you figure out what you want. So that's kind of what I'm hoping to help you get is just more clarity. So
I guess my question would be, how does one structure bylaws in such a way that it gives a clear outline about how someone receives more shares based on their contribution if it's not just a financial transaction? And so I think that's what we're kind of looking for, is that time commitment, as well as frequency and amount of time. Like, what are they implementing and how are they returning to look after what they have done?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you can definitely, like with a cooperative, people do need to make some sort of an investment for that membership share, but it could be sweat equity that earns them that investment, So there's just some threshold where they've put in enough that they are now in. And then beyond that point, they have one vote, and they could vote to make themselves a member of the board of directors and make you not a member of the board of directors. That's the power you'd be giving them. So what's that threshold that somebody could put in that would give them that power? If you're looking for that kind of model. But it's really not that much different from other kinds of ownership. I mean, somebody makes an investment, they're a partner, they have a vote. They could, vote to overthrow you. And that's kind of where I'm trying to get to, is like, where's that threshold? What's your boundary that you are willing to give somebody enough power to that they could be on the board of directors, that they could have that kind of power.
Yeah.
Sorry,
it feels so theoretical to me at this point. Like, I don't know of anybody that I'm seeing as a candidate or anything, like, what I can do is I can feel in my heart that I would really love to have people that are on that level, 4 or 5, maybe total, including us. I don't know, something like that.
Yeah.
But I think it's just a level of trust. for me, that would be the biggest deciding factor. Like,
Yeah.
I want to so deeply trust them and their commitment.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
That I would,
yeah. I mean,
that I can let go of any fear, any whatever, and and at this point, I feel that with Jonathan.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of sounds like.
So I guess the other piece of this is, it sounds like you're talking about a vote model in kind of a sense of democracy being majority rules.
Yeah.
And we're really looking at more of a sociocracy and a consensus-based model. I think that's one of the governance pieces.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think back to what Lauren said and what you've presented in front of us, we're much more ready to talk about newcomers, participants, members, contributors.
Yeah.
And we're not really at the level of being able to even consider partnership. And that's, I think, one of the reasons maybe the attorney said an LLC was a more flexible corporate structure for us right now. And so I don't think we can answer those questions yet for many reasons.
Yeah.
Because we haven't met anyone yet who's even expressed an interest in being a partner.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to me like the cooperative model doesn't make sense in this situation, unless you'd be willing to think of it as a worker cooperative, where it's only the most dedicated workers who have been, with the company for a certain amount of time. I mean, the difference with a cooperative versus an LLC would be the one person, one vote versus one share, or the percentage of ownership would determine the percentage of vote that you get. So do you want that democracy of one person, one vote? And it's different. The decision making of how you decide, who's doing what day to day, who's doing this project, or how this project is being done is completely different than what I'm talking about with the ownership. When I'm talking about the ownership is like, who gets to vote for whether or not you issue more stock? Who gets to vote for whether or not you add another seat to the board of directors? Those kinds of decisions are the decisions that the people with ownership decision-making power would make. It's a very few decisions. They would vote for who's on the board. There's a very small number of decisions that you make at that level. And that's totally different than your governance of your operation. That could be sociocracy, but I have not seen, except for maybe encode.org has a whole structure that's based on holacracy for ownership. And what they do is they use an LLC to make everyone an owner, and people don't even get paid in salary, they get paid in stock. So yeah, that's the only structure that I've seen that's trying to take that kind of decision making to that level. But I think they still just vote for who's on the board.
Right, but then how do you reward somebody for more commitment versus somebody who has less commitment? How do you reward somebody for contributing more and don't incentivize lack of commitment and participation? This is just one of the things I'm still trying to learn how to do that. I've worked for many different kinds of organizations, but I've never actually worked for a cooperative. I worked for a company pre-going cooperative, before it was a cooperative, and I guess what was driving it was that it was a very mission-based organization. And I've worked for a lot of nonprofits, and they highly lean on motivation based on the purpose of that nonprofit and what their guiding accomplishments are to be, like what they're trying to accomplish. And unfortunately, they seem to also simultaneously often really underpay and under-reward people, and they rely heavily on volunteerism. And so one of the critiques that I've had from people who are interested in possibly being contributors to Hotlum is they want to see a model where people can really reap a benefit from contributing, and it's not just volunteering to do something for somebody else who's going to reap 100% of the benefits.
Right. But then you're talking about giving them ownership or something. I mean, I don't know what you would give them other than ownership if you can't pay them.
Right, and that's why we're looking at some kind of a holacracy where people get rewarded at some level for their participation.
Right.
And so, we have kind of explored the possibility of like, a cooperative business, especially around the social forestry.
Mm-hmm.
The challenge is that if you look at a business model that's based on ecological function rather than on extraction, which is synonymous with destruction, we don't have a lot of, economic models except for maybe some organic farming or some permaculture projects that simultaneously reap benefit for people in the short term and reap benefit for the ecological system in the short term benefit. So we're really looking at a long throw, and how do people want to invest in restoring ecosystems and restoring their relationship with those ecosystems so that we're living in a more symbiotic relationship with the ecosystem, and that is the benefit that we're
mm-hmm.
receiving, that we have clean water, clean air, clean food.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really difficult in a transitional economy like we're in,
mm-hmm.
where if I work for a food co-op and then I get, some kind of a, benefit at the end of the year in a dividend, or even if I buy into a retail store and they give me a dividend at the end of the year, very different model because it's just that financial transaction.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm still puzzled by this.
Yeah.
And looking for information.
Yeah. Well, the business model that you have here, it doesn't seem to be something that would be, that financially abundant to be able to sell people on being involved based on a financial reward.
Exactly.
And so what do you have to offer? I mean, you have the use of this space. And so I'm wondering if you should account for that in some way, if you should have some sort of like timeshare points or something that people are earning when they work out there that they could redeem at some point by having nights to stay out there camping or nights to be out there to lead something that they could make money on. Like usage points.
We've actually talked a lot about that, including with those who would want to, say, donate something
mm-hmm.
or donate a certain amount of money, and then they would have a space where they could come almost like a timeshare,
mm-hmm.
And their family members could come. And so that has been part of the conversation. I think also part of the conversation has been this idea that if you want to lead a retreat there, that you're receiving a percentage of the rewards that come from that retreat, both financial and otherwise, social and such.
Yeah. I just wonder if maybe instead of thinking of it as a percentage, you think of it as either they're going to pay you a fee per hour to use the space or something, or they're going to redeem usage points.
Right. But I guess what I'm thinking is that different circles on this model would be doing different things. So let's say a participant was somebody who was participating in a workshop, whereas a contributor was somebody who was leading a workshop, facilitating a workshop. And then maybe a member was somebody who actually supports the possibility of that workshop functioning
mm-hmm.
and have contributed at some level. And so you have three different circles of engagement at the same exact workshop. And so maybe the participant pays one fee, the member pays another fee, but the actual contributor is actually receiving a fee for their services.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe is also receiving certain points toward, some timeshare. And maybe the members are just receiving percentages toward a timeshare, and are able to participate in the workshop for free, whereas the participants are paying for the workshop. Did that come out clear?
I mean, kind of. I think you might be thinking about it in a little bit of a not the best way, because I mean, I have experience because I ran the Integral Center. You know, like I ran a venue where there were all of these teachers who would come in and use the space to teach their classes, and there were also people who would, you know, rent rooms to do massages in, and they were, you know, people who would come there for co-working, and there were people who paid a membership, a regular membership, and that entitled them to come there as much as they wanted. You know, except that they you know, they would come there and they could co-work, but they couldn't just, you know, come in a room and use it for whatever they want. They would have to pay to do that. You know, I've ran a system like this where you have a space and you have people paying a membership, and that entitles them to certain use of the space, but not other use of the space. And that you have teachers who are coming in and teaching stuff, but we weren't paying the teachers. We weren't, well, except that we had regular drop-in classes, so we were. So we had like our regular drop-in classes that were on our schedule, and some of those, the teacher was giving us a percentage. And some of those, I think it was usually a percentage. I'm trying to remember. I think there was a different arrangement too. But then we also had regular rentals where people would just rent the space, and anybody could do that. They didn't have to be a member. You had to be a member to teach a regular class. So, you know, I'm thinking like that kind of thing, and that not everybody who comes out there and teaches something is going to be a part of your organization. Do you see what I'm saying? Like in some cases, you're just going to be renting them space. However, in some cases, they might be a member of your organization, in which case you might be doing a percentage split with them, or some other kind of arrangement. So, but that's a threshold. So there's like the guest teacher, and then there's the member teacher. And so where's that threshold, you know, if you have that kind of differentiation?
I'd like to take a stab at this.
Mm-hmm.
What the threshold is with those. I like what you're saying about the timeshare sort of deal.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say that if someone is participating in a class, you know, great. They're paying for whatever class there is.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm seeing like within the member and contributor pieces that that's really where the time, you know, the timeshare sort of situation would happen. So, I mean, very clearly with like a member who's coming and volunteering for a week or two or whatever, then maybe there's some agreement of like, of a timeshare that they can get. And then with a contributor, I'm not necessarily seeing that as like, I mean, I hear what you're saying as far as like someone is coming and just facilitating a class. That doesn't necessarily make them a contributor.
Mm-hmm.
They're just coming and facilitating class. They might not even be in this
Mm-hmm.
circle.
Or at the same level as visitor.
Yeah. You know, maybe they're like, yeah, maybe participant's not the right word. They're just an initial, you know, they're just here one time or whatever. But I think a contributor is someone who's more, maybe they are participating in a class, but really they're helping us implement something really awesome at Hotlum. They're putting a lot of time and energy and love and maybe financial contribution to something at Hotlum. And so I would say that having some sort of really clear timeshare for them. Yeah, because they're probably, we're not aiming for a financial model so much here as far as like financial contribution, but maybe they can, you know, bring some friends up or something if that's a, or maybe they can have some sort of certain amount of time that they can come and be up there or whatever as part of their, as part of their benefit of being such an integral contributor to Hotlum. But coming and actually just doing like leading a class may or may not mean that they're on that contributor level.
Sure. Yeah.
So one of the things that's occurring to me is that I continue to think about Hotlum as one of our venues. So Hotlum Eco-Regeneration Camp is a venue, but it simultaneously provides a lot more than just space. So we would have all the booking software, we would have all the permitting, we would be providing, of course, a lot of the services that would allow a camp to happen. And so it's a little different than like a venue in a city where someone rents just the space. They're actually renting our infrastructure of being, people being able to go onto our website and see their events and sign up based on our reputation.
Yeah.
So it's similar to the River's Path, where the river itself is a venue, and we can host other workshop leaders and facilitators on the river, but it all goes through the River's Path as an event.
Sure.
Simultaneously, sometimes in rare cases, there is somebody who wants to be able to do their own trip, and we can support that. But that's such a rare occasion. I only know of one person right now who actually does that on the Green River.
Right. But with a campsite, that might happen more often. I mean, what if somebody who comes out there regularly wants to have their birthday party out there or something? It's not a public event.
It's very different than a commercial trip. So I'm talking specifically about a commercial permitted trip, which requires certain amount of ongoing relationship with federal agencies.
Right.
And we provide some. There's a bald eagle flying overhead right now.
I just got distracted.
And so, this is where I'm not 100% clear how, like the Integral Counseling Center, the Integral Center would be similar and yet different. I know of other venues, and I also know of, retreat centers I've been involved with that have like a person who actually tracks all the volunteer hours, and then those volunteers get to go to workshops for free for volunteering. I think we would like to have that kind of a model where people can put in sweat equity, because we don't want this to be unavailable, even to someone who's starting their facilitation career, and they don't have even a website up about their facilitation, but we really believe in them. We can post their event, we can do all the billing, we can do the insurance, and then they receive a percentage based on the amount of people that they get signed up through their own social network.
Yeah. No, I get it. And I do think it is very similar to the Integral Center, because we also had a website. We also had a booking system, which was pretty much just me and my email and my CRM that I was using. But, there was all of this infrastructure. And not everyone who came to the Integral Center and did an event there got to use that. Only some of them did. Only some of them got on our calendar, because we had so much space. And we had 20 rooms to rent out, and I had to rent to some people that I didn't want to put their events on my calendar. But, I did think about the idea, and I did try for a bit to do something like a point system where people could do work trade and earn points to offset their membership fees, or to rent a room, or to go to a workshop or something. I did think through that and looked at some different software that would enable that sort of thing. It's just, when I went to, try to get some work traders and try it out, I couldn't get them to show up consistently. They might show up once, and then they keep calling me after that and say, "Oh, I'm too busy. Can we do it next week? Can we do it next week? Can we do it next week?" I was running into a lot of that, and it ended up being, I might as well just do the work myself. It would take me less work than trying to track these people down and get them to do it.
Yeah, well, luckily with this, I mean, I'm not envisioning that it would be something where we'd be calling people and saying, "Hey, can you come up?" I mean, of course we might do that, but not necessarily count on it. But it would be more just like, if somebody comes and volunteers, there's a canoe going by that's painted all these wild colors.
Camo canoe just
went by. Okay, so what I was saying was I lost my train of thought.
We wouldn't be calling people necessarily, outreaching to them.
We wouldn't be, but it would be more like if someone comes and volunteers, And we can have it on the website saying, you volunteer and then you can get some sort of agreed upon benefit, but it's not something that we'd be calling and hoping that they would be available. It'd be just more like, hey, you came, thank you for participating in this project, and we'd like to offer you to come and stay for a week whenever you want. Just let us know when you'd like to come up, or you can attend a workshop, or whatever.
Yeah.
So
I think
it feels a little bit different.
I think this does, demand content, like a customer relations management system, a CRM. I think it does require a lot of effort to manage. And simultaneously, I think that's, part of this accounting system that we have to kind of develop, is that there's going to be those who are putting in different kinds of equity. If we're going to transition away from just a purely cash economy and a capitalistic model, it's going to be challenging.
Yeah.
And so I guess,
and if you want to do it fairly, and whether you say democratic or sociocratic, if you want to do it fairly, you have to account for it. Because I've seen time and time again, people in your position doing community gardens or something and saying, oh, I don't want to do accounting. That's too much work, or that's too mechanical or something. And then it ends up being a dictatorship. And because they're making all the shots, it's their opinion as to whether somebody's done enough work to deserve to, harvest all of this or whatever, or to, be able to lead the next thing. If you don't account for it, then it's not transparent and it's not necessarily fair. So accounting in some way for whatever kind of contributions people are making, which could be financial, like we were talking about doing something like a Patreon where people are paying on a regular basis. So that gives them a certain number of points, and whether they want to come redeem that once a year by coming out to one big event, or if they'd rather just come out and camp once a month for a night, whatever it is that they want to use that for. And different things could be different amounts of points. So if they're using your whole system, if they're using your software, if they'd have to get permitted, that would cost more points than just coming out and camping by themselves or with their friends.
Right. And we'd love to have people be able to share their points too. So,
sure,
if somebody wants to donate a certain amount of money, and then they want some friends, who live in the area to be able to come up and, experience something, that would be awesome if we had a good accounting system. So that's really good advice.
So, if you have a CRM that you might suggest that's, affordable, at least at this point, something that's like low cost, or there's a trial for a certain number of, just something, because we really haven't, we've looked, but we haven't really found, there's a lot of CRMs out there, and a lot of them are really set up for much larger organizations than ours.
Well, I think you might want to have a CRM that's combined with a booking software, probably.
We already have a booking.
Yeah. Okay. We have a booking.
Okay. Well, what I was using, I'll just describe it. And we're about out of time, and we can, just pick up where we left off next time. But what I was using was called Streak, and it's just a plugin for Gmail. And basically you just make a spreadsheet that you plop your email threads into, so you can track your email through your emails through the spreadsheet, and it comes up with a box to the right of your emails that has whatever fields. They could be drop down, pick, multiple choice kind of fields. They could be short answer or long answer. So I was using that at the Integral Center, so I would track someone who's requested a booking, someone who's confirmed their booking, someone who's paid, and someone who's completed their booking. So that was the columns that they would move through. So the very top box would be which column they were in, and then under that was which room, how much they were paying, any notes I had. So that made it really easy, as long as people were contacting me through email. So if somebody called me, all I would say is, okay, that's cool, email me.
Okay. Yeah, I do remember you talking about that. I'd forgotten.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And that might be really good to use for our initial inquiries, because we are receiving inquiries through the ecosystem regeneration camps, restoration camps, ecosystem restoration camps.org's has a link to us,
Mm-hmm.
and you can send an email
Mm-hmm.
for an application to come visit us. And then we get that email. So we could definitely implement that kind of a structure. We've also talked about implementing a Google form to allow volunteers to log their hours, because we need to be logging hours for volunteers, which is kind of an onerous job.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, I think it would be interesting to find a way to kind of track someone's engagement across social media platforms, and track someone's financial contributions, time contributions. And a lot of that can be done in a relatively inexpensive CRM. It may end up being that right now we have kind of a Frankenstein multiple system thing going on, because we do already have a booking software. It's complex, but it's good to talk about it, with a business coach, to be able to flush out what the problems are and then start getting good questions about what are the solutions we need. So this is a really important conversation, and I'm looking forward to this could be, part one of this conversation. This is a really long one.
Yeah, well, and you did say that you needed the most help with your organizational structure, your governance and your ownership, and they're really intertwined. They are separate, your day-to-day decision making from your ownership level of decision making, but they influence each other, and that's why I want to work with startups instead of working with existing companies, because when you have a C Corp or an S Corp that's already set up in this way where it's totally controlled by stock owners, then it doesn't matter what democratic cool structure you set up. The second that the shit hits the fan and things get difficult, those stock owners are going to say, nope, we're not doing this anymore, and they're gonna supersede whatever you set up. So I want to make sure that whatever you choose as your ownership structure is in symbiosis and agrees with the governance structure you've chosen. And I do have expertise in this. I have researched cooperative ownership and LLCs and whatnot. I'm not an expert in CNS corps because I don't believe in them. But I do know a fair bit, and I can help you get. And this decisions here don't have to be final. Like I'm not your lawyer. I'm not putting this down in a legal document. We're just discussing options. So if you want to go down a rabbit hole and, okay, what if we did make it a cooperative? What would that look like? Like, let's go down that rabbit hole. And if you decide at the end of it, nope, that's not what we want, we'll come back out and we'll go, okay, well, what if we did an LLC? So that's the discussion that I want to have with you.
Right. So the point of juncture we're at currently is an LLC, which is easy and small and flexible, versus a social purpose corporation, which is much more onerous to incorporate as in California. And we were just informed that at least one attorney felt like we could do an LLC and have bylaws that would ensure that our purpose and our environmental and social efforts are considered in our decisions, and that it's not just about the financial remuneration that the stockholders are going to be receiving, but they're receiving benefit that is environmental.
You can write anything into the bylaws in LLC, and I'm totally down with that. That is a cool way to go, and having it be simple at first. I mean, LLC is so flexible. You can make it super simple. It's just you guys right now. Maybe you don't need to write a whole lot in right now. Maybe you just need to figure out your governance structure for making decisions between you two, and then with whoever jumps in to help with projects, and not worry about that yet. But I want to know where you're wanting to go. And what your boundaries are. You're saying you want this group of 3 to 5, core people. Okay, that's important information to know. That's very different than having a large democratic organization with lots of people making those decisions. So we're getting there. We're figuring it out.
And maybe that number would change. That's just kind of my initial feeling.
Yeah, but it doesn't mean that my vision of having people feel like they have, a place. I mean, Lauren had a summer camp that she was deeply emotionally invested in growing up, and her mother ran the campfire program there. And when it sold, Lauren wanted to buy it back in her teens.
I was 18.
And at 18, she wasn't quite able to afford it. And I've been to places in my life that I felt like they were my place. Reservoir Canyon, for example, in San Luis Obispo County, was a place that felt very much like my home, and I cared for it deeply. And so we want people to have that sense of, what Craig Chalquist talks about, terra psychology, that sense of belonging to place, feeling indigenous to that place, and stewarding it. And so that's where the leveling comes out, is we want people to feel like they can come back again and again. Maybe many of the people who watch this video are going to be like, I remember a campground that I went to, and saw that creek over and over again, and I want, I felt so attached to that place. We'd always pick it up and clean up after, or a community garden that they feel totally attached to. They don't necessarily own legally the deed to that community garden, but they feel like their little plot and the entire garden is their place to care for.
Yeah.
Because we feel like the entire earth needs to be cared for that way.
Yeah.
And so if we can do that within our bylaws, that would be awesome.
Yeah.
Right. I think that's such a perfect way of describing it, Jonathan, because for me, the unexpected gift of COVID is that I was able to spend 3.5 months straight at Hotlum without having to leave, without having to go do anything else, run my business, whatever. And so I was able to start having that level of connection, just the beginning of it at Hotlum. And so, we're going to be back there tonight.
Yeah.
And I feel it in my body, like this yearning of how are the trees doing that we planted? What does the Canyon live oak look like after, such a hot summer? Is it doing okay? How's the mulberry tree? How's the, all these different things? Or is the bear still there? Are we still going to see the toads? Like all of that kind of feeling as I'm coming back. I had that with Takahana, where it really felt like home to me. At least as much as my, home that I shared with my parents.
Yeah, I totally get that.
So that's, that if that can be the gift that a member or a contributor gets from being able to be involved, is the more that they can be involved, the more that they feel like that Hotlum is a part of them. Then there is that intrinsic reward that comes from being involved, that grows the more involved you are.
Yeah.
Without having to organize some structure. That's just how it is.
Yeah. That's great. Yes. I want to help you create that. So that's a great place to stop. Thank you guys so much. And I can hardly wait to see pictures. You're going to post some pictures of what it looks like out there now when you get there?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Totally.
Yeah.
Great. Well, I'll share them on social media. So if you're watching this on YouTube, check out our social media pages and you'll see some photos. So, all right. Thank you guys. Thank you, everyone. And we'll see you next time.
Look forward to talking to you soon. Bye.